General quarters. All hands man your battle stations.
Welcome to WETSU, a Battleship New Jersey podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Spevak, CEO of the Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today's episode is brought to you by ELEC 825, the Labor Employer Cooperative of Operating Engineers Local 825, whose highly skilled members played a vital role in the recent dry docking of America's most decorated battleship. It's a real pleasure to have Commander Skip Leeson, U.S. Navy retired, a veteran of the Battleship New Jersey, and someone whose service to our nation and this ship spans decades. Skip's story begins in Middletown, Delaware, and later in Woodbridge, New Jersey, before taking him to Rutgers University, and soon after into the U.S. Navy. Commissioned as an ensign in 1967, he trained at the Anti-Submarine Warfare School in Key West before joining the destroyer USS Buck, ED 761, off the coast of Vietnam. On board, he served as the Anti-Submarine Warfare Officer, the Gunnery Plot Officer, directing ship bombardments, and as the officer of the deck. Notably during this time, the Buck was called upon to protect the USS New Jersey on station off the DMZ. After active duty, he continued his service in the Navy Reserve, eventually rising to the rank of commander. In 1982, he was selected to command the reserve unit attached to the Battleship New Jersey, his second reserve ship command. Just a year later, when New Jersey was deployed for several months off the coast of Beirut, Lebanon, he petitioned Navy leadership to allow his unit to step in and provide relief. His efforts resulted in the largest peacetime crew relief operation in U.S. Navy history, sending over 700 sailors home for a well-deserved rest. Today, Skip continues his service aboard the USS New Jersey in a new way, as an educator, a tour guide, and an integral part of our overnight encampment program. His passion ensures future generations understand the history and legacy of this great warship. Skip Leeson, welcome to WETSU. It's always a pleasure to welcome you home.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So let's start the conversation where we always start, and that's, why did you join the Navy?
Well, it turned out that I was draft deferred. I was working for the U.S. Department of Agriculture down at Rutgers University, and a couple of my fraternity brothers said, well, we have to go into Whitehall Street in New York and take the Navy OCS test. Can you drive us in? So I drove them in. I'm the only one that passed it, and I figured, well, let's do it.
That's this history.
My uncle was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and he worked in New York City with in World War II for all the ships heading out of New York overseas.
You spent some of your formative years here in New Jersey. Did you ever think your naval career would be so intertwined with the namesake ship of where you were from?
No, not really. I mean, I was living in New Jersey at the time. I was selected to be commanding officer of the reserve unit. It was the first and only reserve unit ever attached to a battleship in the history of the battleships, the Iowa class and all the others. We were the only ones. And it was an honor to be able to do it. I enjoyed it. It was my second startup for a reserve unit. I started with the USS Arkansas CGN nuclear powered cruiser 41. And that was a startup unit also. So I guess they thought I could do it.
Shortly after OCS, you were assigned to USS Buck, which was at the time operating off the coast of Vietnam. What was it like going from college kid to OCS, and then I'm assuming shortly thereafter on board a ship where you, at a very young age, as a young officer, a junior officer, were serving, as an OOD, as a gunnery plot officer in a war zone? What was that transition like for you from a young college kid to a young junior officer on board, thrust into a position where you had young sailors at your command? What was that like for you?
It made me a man in a hurry. You grow up fast when you're 21, 22 years old, and you're standing up on a bridge of a ship in charge of it. What we did was, we were the first ship in Sea of Japan when the Pueblo was taken. We were the ones assigned to go in Wonsan Harbor and get it and bring it back out. And of course, if they had said do it, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, but we were ready to go. And then when we came back, we wound up anchored mouth of the Saigon River, working with the Australians in 3 Corps, helping them out. Aussie, oi, 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 glug, glug, glug. Take a drink of it. And we went up and down the Saigon River a little bit, and then we were Johnny on the spot for a lot of things, truly. And we made 2 cruises over. They came back to San Diego, and then we went back over there again. It was sailing alongside the New Jersey was a very unique experience. Nautical mile is 2,000 yards, and we were 1 mile off the starboard side. And she would call us and say, we're getting ready to fire the big guns. So we had to put everybody inside. because of the noise. The noise level was terrible.
Was that the first time you ever saw the Battleship New Jersey?
Yes, it was. And it was awesome.
When you, just going back for a second to what you said, you were the first ship in the Sea of Japan following the Pueblo. What was the mood like on board your ship? Your sort of,
let's go get
after
them.
what happened?
Let's go get them.
Yeah. And unfortunately, never got that.
Sasebo, Japan, going through a 2-week destroyer tender availability. And what happened was I come walking on board and noticing that we're lit off. Brian McCamey was the OOD at the time. And I said, what's happening? And he's saying, well, the North Koreans stole one of our ships and we're on our way. We're getting underway in an hour. So, okay. And there we went.
There you went. We spoke a few episodes ago with our friend Ken Kirsch, who mentioned that during his time in the machine shop, he was making replacement parts for the Buck. Obviously, you didn't know each other at the time, but how did things move back and forth between the two ships, by highline, by barge, by tender? How are things moving across when you were there serving off the coast of Vietnam with the battleship?
During Vietnam, did not have helicopters, so we just went alongside and highlined the compressor over to them. And according to Ken, destroyers don't know how to repair anything anyway. And
you didn't quite say
said it to me. No, we had a good relationship over there with the battleship. We made sure ships didn't get too close to it. There were a lot of other ships that were driving around in that area off of I-Corps and 2-Corps because they fired off of both. One DMZ and 2-Corps. They fired off of both. In fact, one of the guys I sailed with on the destroyer wound up in country on a call for fire mission in 2-Corps, and he actually worked with the New Jersey. And he said it was amazing. Yeah.
Well, we hear those stories. Those are some of my favorite stories to hear about the ship and its history. After active duty, you continued your service in the Navy Reserve, as you mentioned, eventually commanding 2 reserve units, the first for the Arkansas CGN 41, as you mentioned, and then, of course, the battleship. How did you end up in command of that reserve unit?
I applied for it.
Okay.
And
simple as that.
With my background, when I graduated from OCS, I was the color company commander. I mean, we won everything. So I was number 1 leader when I graduated from OCS. And I've always believed in the philosophy: you lead people, you manage things. And the people you lead are the ones that they do the managing for you. And if it's done correctly, it's very successful. And I did it very, very well for the Arkansas. And they said, well, let's give them another chance.
So you started the reserve. At that time, there was no reserve unit and then one was started in West Trenton, correct?
It started just before the New Jersey got commissioned.
Okay.
Long Beach.
Okay. Were you there for the recommissioning? No.
I was regional sales manager. And so I was busy.
In 1983-1984, you initiated what became the largest peacetime crew relief operation in U.S. Navy history, sending over 700 sailors home from New Jersey's deployment off Beirut. As we've talked about previously on WETSU, the ship was on station for almost 191 straight days without hitting port. How did this idea to institute this crew relief come about? And how did you convince Navy leadership to ultimately allow your unit to make this happen?
In December of 83, the ship was extended indefinitely without a leave time. Now, it's always been known that if you're out at sea for more than a year, then the sailors can keep asking for a transfer. So she had to be out of there by April. But as she was heading over to Beirut, it was fine. She got there in September of 83. And in December, they extended it. And then we decided with the reserve unit, well, let's call up the chief of naval reserve down in New Orleans and see if we can get our reserve unit on board. So we had roughly 250 sailors in the reserve unit, John Baker and a training officer and a bunch of chiefs.
And those are sailors not just in New Jersey, but all around the country. They're all in New Jersey? Okay.
But there was a call nationwide. I mean, after the first 2 flights, which were basically set up for our units, they still called, but then they started calling them nationwide. Captain Milligan, Richard Milligan, who was the CEO of the New Jersey over there, loved it. They thought it was terrific. First people they sent back were the ones who had children after they left. And that tells you what kind of a leader he was.
Absolutely.
And then after a while, it got to be a lottery. But when they were over there, they had the Bob Hope show. I missed that, but I was over there for the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
There you go.
That was a good show.
And how long was your reserve crew on the ship during that time?
27 days.
27 days. So what was out of that 27 days, then how long was an average relief for somebody, one of the active sailors?
Relief was a 30-day relief.
30-day relief. Okay.
What happened was Navy was flying DC-9s all over the place. So we just said, fly us up. And Milligan said, fine. Captain Milligan said, bring them over. We'll bring them over. And our flight, we left Norfolk, refueled St. John's, Newfoundland, refueled Vosges, Azores, refueled Rota, Spain, refueled Sigonella, Italy. And then we flew into Ben Gurion International in Tel Aviv. And the ship had a couple of buses there waiting to bus us up to Haifa. And they were at anchor just outside the quay wall in Haifa. And that's when we got to get on the ship. And then from there, we just headed back up to Lebanon. But in the meantime, while we were coming on board, the DC-9s were sitting down at Tel Aviv. And that's when they sent the crews back. When we left through Larnaca, Cyprus. They heloed us from the ship over to Larnaca.
Well, what was it like arranging? I mean, just logistically, of getting 700 sailors, some of them in New Jersey, but a lot of them, as you noted, around the country. What was that like logistically, getting everybody over there? You just mentioned all the stops that it took to get your one crew relief flight over there. But how was the effort logistically to get 700 guys from all over the U.S. all the way over to Lebanon?
There were so many people that volunteered, they had to turn them down.
Wow. Everyone wanted to be part of the battleship.
In fact, when we were on the ship, we had to locate 4 of the reservists because they didn't want to go home. So we had to, when we flew back to Larnaca. But it was, the Chief of Naval Reserve did a phenomenal job. The PAO on the ship at that time was Lieutenant Commander Eric Wollenbach, who did a phenomenal job accepting all these people on board. The division officers, they were ready to put our guys to work. Fortunately, most of them were well trained and worked in where they should. They had some problems with communications and stuff like that. So we had IT men come on board, guys that actually worked for the telephone companies that came on board to fix everything for them. I mean, it was, and the same thing happened when we were on the Arkansas. The Arkansas lost all interior communications. We had a guy who was a repairman for the telephone company. He came in and fixed the whole thing. So that's what reservists do. They use their private jobs on the ship. And they help, and they teach, and they learn.
Over there for 27 days, 30 days. What was the mood like when you returned?
We didn't want to go back. I mean, we're ready now, Marshall. I'm ready to fill this up with oil, put more missiles and bullets on board, and I'm ready to go again. But it was a thrill of having been able to do it, and we all did that too. I mean, we had a couple of big reunions. After that, it was interesting because I had with me, and I don't even know if he's still around, but Fred Jeffries, who was the byline reporter for the Trentonian, and he came with us. He did a lot of stuff over there with the PAO, writing up what we did and everything that we did. In fact, he's the one that arranged for me to get letters of appreciation from the legislation of the state of New Jersey so I could give them to Captain Milligan and show them to him. And then when I got back, Milligan gave me something to give back to Governor King. So we went, and Fred arranged that whole thing too, to go in and present something to Governor King from the Battleship New Jersey.
What was the I'm sure that obviously the mood on board with the big relief effort coming, I'm sure morale was high at the time on board, knowing that so many people were going to be able to go home to their families. But it was also an interesting time on board. It was slightly after the barracks bombing in Beirut. And of course, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, we lost a chief in that. ETC Michael Dzerzhinsky was killed in the Beirut barracks bombing. And then many of the crew of this ship went landside to help with the cleanup efforts. And
mostly the Marines.
The Mardet, yeah. And so when your crew arrived, what was the mood on board?
When we arrived, they had pulled the Marines off out of Lebanon. Right next to us was, I think it was an LPH, but it was the USS Trenton, What I wanted to do was get the helicopter up in the air, get us together, and have it say Trenton, New Jersey. But the CEO of the Trenton, Senior Milligan, and he just said, nope, we're going home. And that was it. Anyway, the moon on board, my job was working with the executive officer, with the JAG lawyer on board, helping with a lot of the edicts that were coming out and train the men, the reservists. So when we got back, we would have all the training we needed to come back and forth. Everybody was so into it and working on the Battleship New Jersey. I had a gunner's mate in my reserve unit, and he was assigned to the left barrel in turret one. And I think that was repeat, repeat, and ditto. Those were the three. He loved it. He absolutely loved it. And when we got back, he had a whole thing on how to shoot the 16-inch guns. So they all got into it.
And as we know, the ship fired on 4 separate occasions 16-inch rounds into Lebanon. Was the relief crew on board for any of those?
The second one, we got on board like 2 days after the fire, the 268 rounds or however many it was. What had happened was the admiral in charge of the task force sent a plane out to take pictures, photoshops. Well, got shot down. And I don't know whether anybody remembers, but Reverend Jesse Jackson actually went over to help free the pilot. Captain Milligan was rather upset. We could have done that from here. So in February, the admiral says, okay, I'm going to call your bluff. These are your 14 targets. We demolished them all, every single one of them. And one of them was actually a Syrian general's headquarters who was in charge of the Syrian missile sites and everything else in Lebanon. We demolished everything, shot it.
You've had the rare distinction of being one of the few to serve on this ship, both in uniform and now as a part of our museum team. How does it feel to keep serving the ship now in a different role?
I was managing, or actually leading a sales force nationwide when the ship came in and opened up right after 9/11. And the kids looked at me and said, Dad, it means so much to you. Why don't you go back? So they threw a surprise party for me for my 60th birthday here in the wardroom. And that started it. Tom Jaskell, who was in charge of the overnight encampment program at the time, came up, convinced me I should be part of the encampment program. So I did. So after a while, the kids start saying, Dad, you're spending too much time on the ship. So I got my wife a dog, and that helped a little bit. But no, it just... This is my ship. When I was here addressing the submarine crew, and a lot of the 80 sailors were on board, some of them remember. Some of them had gotten their flights home because of us. Others say, well, it's about time somebody said we demolished everything we shot at because everybody was complaining and all of that. This is amazing. It's a battleship. It's the most decorated battleship in the history of the United States Navy. And I am so proud of it as a ship. And I thank you for keeping that memory as a ship, as a battleship, even though we're a museum, but we are a ship.
Operating engineers are the men and women that move mountains. And the Engineers Labor Employer Cooperative, ELEC, puts them to work. They create opportunities for the men, women, and union signatory contractors of Local 825. Repaving our roads, keeping our homes bright and warm, and even building our favorite team stadium. We understand infrastructure. That's why ELEC and Local 825 are ready to get to work.
You mentioned partying in the wardroom. I want to go back to your time on board for a second and say, what was the mood like in the wardroom with people coming on, people coming off? And what was the crew like? What was the camaraderie like when you are moving that many people in and out very quickly?
Yeah, it went Captain Milligan was the best leader I've ever worked under, as I said. When I came on board, I was the 3rd senior surface warfare officer on board. That's it. And surface warfare officer means eligible for command. And so since I was part of the temporary crew, I was joking with the major of the Marine of Mardet, and I just said, you better keep an eye on those two because you don't want me running this thing. And he goes, yes, problem, sir. Next one in line was Craig Covington. He was the ops boss. And he actually wound up as XO, I think, of one of the ships over in Desert Storm. But it was fine. I mean, I was treated as I should have been. There was another fellow coming on board here, Captain Joe Azzolino. Well, I'm sure you've heard that name a few times. And he was part of the group actually bringing the New Jersey back to become a museum. So, but he was on board the ship for a while too. And it was a Navy ship, and it was run like a Navy ship. And it was just, everybody was great. Never had a problem with any of them. I mean, I've been walking down through talking to Chang, the chief engineer, and talking to some of the people down there about, well, how'd you like your Liberty in Cairo or Alexandria? And they said, it was terrific and all of that. And we got along well.
Everyone moved in the same direction, which is always great to hear. As a tour guide and as a ship educator, do you have any stories from your career or from the ship's history that sort of you think you found in your time as a museum person that sort of resonates most with visitors?
I try to keep the tour on the level of the people I am touring around. That's number one. Number two, since I do most of it in the encampment programs, it's for the kids. And sometimes the parents can't even follow you when you get down to the level of the kids. But it's for the children. I mean, I love going down through Turret 2 and showing them. Now that the one hoist is working, I mean, I'll look at one of the kids and I'll just say, listen, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of kids were playing around and we lost one up there. Somebody want to go looking for him. And all the parents, you have to add humor. You have to add it to keep. And with the little kids, you got to keep moving. Once you stop your thing. And then going into the computer rooms, which is my favorite because that's what I did on a destroyer. The Mark 1 Able fire control system for the 5-inch 38s off of Vietnam. That was my job.
You mentioned overnight encampment program. What's it like seeing kids sleeping in the same bunks where some of your sailors slept?
It's
going
amazing.
through the chow line where your sailors went through the chow line.
It's truly amazing. It's an experience for these kids that they will never, ever see again. And that's why a lot of people we keep coming back, returns. One time a while back, there was a group from Delaware that came on board and we're standing on the fantail and I'm just saying, hey, yeah, I rode alongside this on the destroyer. And one guy yells from the back, one of the fathers, but what destroyer was it? And I said, it was the Buck. And he goes, my father sailed on that. I said, what's your last name? And he goes, Arlette. And I said, Steve Arlette was our communications officer. It was Rob Arlette, had his son, Jared, who went through the academy and everything else. But it was Rob Arlette who was on board with the friends ever since. But I sailed with his father on the Buck. So, I mean, I was down in Florida last winter and I'm walking and I'm getting off a bus at Disney. And one guy looks at me and says, Skip. I go, yeah, we were on the ship. I mean, it's just, what a feeling of pride to be able to do it. And for all of us who do it, getting those kids on board is absolutely phenomenal.
When you look back at your decades of service,
You have to say,
when you look back at your time in the Navy, what makes you the most proud?
that I did it. I can't say anything more than that I did it. I mean, I did a few things. I helped work with our blue and gold officer to get people, both men and women, into the Naval Academy, being on board here. Just the fact that I did it. And what makes me most proud is that my wife went along with it. She wasn't here for my active duty, but she was on board for my reserves. Does she want to come sleep over on a battleship?
No, I wouldn't think so.
No. It smells like machinery oil. Yeah, isn't that great?
My wife tells me that when I come home, I smell like the battleship. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that smells like, but apparently it is the smell.
I even said, listen, what I could do is I could come out with some aftershave that smells like machinery oil. For the sailors.
Might be a hit. So you work a lot, as we talked about, with young people here who are visiting the ship. And so for those who you've had the pleasure of talking to, or that might be listening to this, who are considering service in the military, or more specifically in the Navy, any advice for those types of people?
Working with youth groups in church. I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to go to college. And I said, what would you like to do? One guy said, I want to do this. And I said, do you realize the best training you can get is in the military? I said, if you want to sail the ocean blue, join the Navy. If you want to sit in Cape May and watch the bikinis running around, join the Coast Guard. If you want a nice hotel room, join the Air Force. Or if you really want to be a soldier, join the Marines. I said, each one has their own separate training program, which will train you for life. And it'll give you the discipline. That's what I needed more than anything when I joined the Navy. After coming out of a fraternity, I needed the discipline, and I got it. It's amazing how easily you can transfer over. Yes, I have helped people get into the Naval Academy. A very close friend of my daughter's in high school. He joined the Navy. He became a fire control technician for Seawards. Then he decided, I want to go to Penn State NROTC. So I wrote a letter for him. And next thing I know is he's Navy's paying for him to go to Penn State NROTC. I just said he would be a welcome to any wardrobe. And next thing is he's flying helicopters, special op helicopters over in the Far East. He finally got out, and now he's flying helicopters for, I guess, EMTs in the Poconos, private company that they're flying helicopters for. That's, that makes me proud to think that I could be able to him out doing something like that, or just helping some of the people. Some of my sonarmen back in Vietnam. One of the main reasons why I decided I was going to get into the Navy, even though I was drafted third, was I don't want to get drafted. I had college graduate electronic engineers as sonarmen because they didn't want to get drafted. They signed up with the Navy to become sonarmen, and they were excellent. Boy, could they do live. Anyway, that's where I am.
You mentioned earlier the Marine Corps and the Mardet who went ashore in Lebanon. What was the relationship between the Mardet and ship's company at your time on board?
I was during the ship one day, and I walked up to the missile decks, the Tomahawks, and there's a Mardet guy up there with his 45. Sir, you're not allowed up here. And I said, okay. If in fact there was some type of thing going on, but they had to run down the passageway, get out of there. They'd knock you over, but they had something they had to do. Lunchtime, 5 laps around the main deck between turret 1 and turret 3 is a mile. They'd be out running every lunchtime. Now, it was funny because they pulled out of Lebanon and they all went into Haifa, Israel. And by going into Haifa, I'm looking there at the major. We're sitting there having lunch together. And I said, aren't you worried about them? He says, no, I'm not worried at all because tomorrow morning we're having a full inspection. These guys were standing there. I thought half of them were going to fall over. I'm so glad they're on our side. But no, there was no problem. I got a hold of a kid who was the executive officer of the ship at the time. And I said, can I go up on the top? He said, I'll walk you up there. So he walked.
As you know, we are going to be celebrating this October, the 50th birthday of the Navy. Of course, in November as well, 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps. As you look back on the history of the Navy and you look forward to the next 250 years, what do you think the future of the Navy really looks like?
I had an opportunity one time to tour a few of the Harley Burke destroyers when they came in here. And also right after I got back from Beirut, John Baker had a friend of his who flew the 141s out of McGuire Air Force Base. And he was willing to fly us down to Biloxi, Mississippi, Pascagoula, where the Iowa was coming. He flew us down for a weekend away, as long as he could get on the ship and get a tour of the ship. So I met, and I don't know whether you've met Neckau or not, but he was the CEO of the ship at the time. And he's part of the board for the Iowa now on the West Coast. And so we went down there and flying down and everything else. It's just, so we did that for a weekend and came back. Walt didn't come with us that weekend. I don't know why, but a year later, Walt was with us on the ship. 150 years. We were right next to where they were building the Ticonderoga cruisers at that in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And we were watching everything up to it was almost like just a line coming down. And then we saw the Vincennes, which was the first deck launched missiles for the cruiser. So we got a tour of that. We walked around on that for a little bit. Where it is now, it's all push button. To me, I'd rather go back to where I was on an old World War II destroyer compared to what they do now, especially with the Aegis fire control system. It is phenomenal. It's up in Moorestown. Anybody who rides up that Route 295, I call it the ship of the desert because you look over there, used to be RCA. They were the ones that started. And since we were drilling in Trenton, we used to go down there for tours for the reserve unit. We take them on a tour of the Aegis. Spy 1 Alpha, it's up to Spy 4 Golf or something like that. But I mean, when they can target 270 targets at once, and now they have sonar tied into it. So now they have everything in their combat information center to where the sonar, everything is there. Well, we were over in Beirut. They were having a very hard time with the air picture. And across the horizon coming was the Ticonderoga, the first Aegis fire control ship. She had the air picture within 30 minutes. And she could tell you what was friendly, what was not friendly, what was unknown. If it was unknown, a plane would go up and find out what it was. But when that happened, Captain Milligan just sitting where you are now, the captain's seat. But the captain would just go, "Thank God," because we had no idea what would be coming after us.
Right, certainly. I've started doing a little bit of a round robin question and answer with a few people, and I like to do the same now. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I just want you to give simply the first thing that comes to the top of your head.
Remember, I'm a sailor.
Yeah. Outside of the battleship, your favorite Navy ship of all time?
USS Buck, DD 761.
Thought you might say that, and I think I know the answer to this next question. Favorite captain of the battleship?
No. Although I like that Fogarty, but as I said, Fogarty was good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's the one that brought the ship into commission and everything else. But Captain Milligan was the one that knew it. He took over at the right time.
Yeah. It's 2025. You're a young 22-year-old, just commissioned as an ensign. You can serve anywhere you want on any ship you want. What type of ship, what class of ship, or any specific ship that you would want to serve on in today's Navy?
Arleigh Burke destroyer. That's the Navy, to be honest. That's, compared to what they have, what we had as destroyers, we were expendable. I mean, if anybody were to go after the New Jersey in Vietnam, we were the one that was supposed to get in the way. If we were the one that was supposed to want to get the Pueblo. They're expendable. The Arleigh Burke destroyer right now has, as far as missiles go, has more firepower than the New Jersey had. We don't use the 16-inch guns anymore. So what do they have for shore bombardment? They got an automatic 5-inch gun, 5-inch 54s, which fire faster than a twin mount here of the 5-inch 38s. They still have the 21-inch torpedo tubes. They have sonar. I couldn't tell you if there was we're sailing around the eastern Mediterranean. We couldn't tell you if there was a submarine out. But we had a couple of destroyers with us that had the sonar capabilities of it. That would be an Arleigh Burke destroyer. And one of my bucket lists is to go up to Bath, Maine, and watch them being built.
Ryan and Libby did that last year and said it was an incredible experience. I've not been there myself, although I did get a tour of the USS John Basselon, which I served on the commissioning committee for last November up in New York City. And we were able to take a quick tour of the Basselon, which was just an incredible ship. You're right, the Arleigh Burke destroyer, and this was the newest one, a Class 4A, White 4A, I should say. Really, really beautiful piece of machinery.
As a segue, I used to play golf with Carlos Spevak, John's brother.
Really? Is that right?
From up just outside of New Brunswick. And I knew his sister was. So yeah. Of course, the Basilone Bridge and all of that.
Yeah.
It's the one he got his Medal of Honor in Guadalcanal, came home, said, "I want to go back." He was killed in Ewa.
Yeah. I want to be with my boys. I think that was his famous phrase. And then one, of course, received the Navy Cross for his time at Ewa.
When I heard that, Carlos, I don't think when they heard that there was going to be a John Basselon, Arleigh Burke, that culminated everything.
As I can imagine. If you could stand one more watch anywhere on the New Jersey, if the ship was still in commission,
It would be on the bridge over by the Gaza Strip. Been there, done that.
if you could describe the Battleship New Jersey in just one word, what would it be?
Amazing.
Good answer. Now, of course, this is the WETSU podcast. As you know, we eat this stuff up for something like that. I ask every guest if there's any particular WETSU moments that really stand out from either their time on board here or just your time in the Navy.
Well, I love being on board. That goes without saying, as does Ken. The overnight encampment program, we think, has been very successful. And we love doing it. It's teaching the kids what it's all about. I mean, I have a grandson that's really into World War II. And he's been on board here overnight. He got to shoot the saluting cannon and everything. His favorite spot to go was New Orleans, World War II Museum. And I've been. And so when I started talking about World War II things on the ship, like the computers, he really got into it. The kids just don't, playing, some of the games on their computers aren't anything like walking around this. Teaching them the history. And you can't move forward unless you know the history of the past.
Absolutely. Finally, my last question, Skip, is we talked a lot about education. We talked a lot about the next generation, some of your time here on board. What does home mean to you when you step aboard at Battleship New Jersey today?
When I step aboard it, I salute the flag. As an officer, I say I have permission to come aboard. I use the officer's brow, not the enlisted brow on the back. Overall, I just love coming up with it. It brings back so many good memories. Obviously, being in the military as long as I have, 25 years, 2.5 years on active duty and 22 and a half in reserves. There were some times where I questioned if I wanted to keep going. But
Seems only natural.
I couldn't give it up. I couldn't give it up. And when I got selected to be the CEO of the reserve unit of the battleship, I just said, where do you go from here? And that's why I was with U.S. Forces Caribbean for a while. And who did I report to? But Captain Richard Milligan's brother, General Robert Milligan from the Marines. So I showed him a picture and he looked at me and says, who's that guy with you? But he was okay. He was okay. He was a West Point graduate, or not West Point, again, Academy graduate also, 2 years ahead of Richard Milligan. So I got to, I am, think the only one ever in the world to have fitness reports signed by the brothers.
I didn't even know that he had a brother who was a Marine general, so I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, he made 3-star.
Oh, wow.
He just made commandant, but he really wasn't too political either.
Got it. Well, Skip Leeson, thank you for sharing your story with us today, from standing watch off Vietnam to leading the largest peacetime crew relief in Navy history, to continuing your service here on board as an educator and as a guide for our youth. Your legacy is deeply woven into the story of this battleship. It's always a pleasure to have you on board, back where you belong here on New Jersey. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today on this episode of WETSU. If you'd like to experience this history firsthand, as we talked about, plan your visit at battleshipnewjersey.org. When you climb aboard, take a tour, spend the night in the bunks with somebody like Skip.
I won't be in.
We'll be back in your stateroom.
I won't be in my stateroom.
So until next time, my name is Marshall Spevak. Thank you for listening to WETSU, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thank you.
Operating engineers are the men and women that move mountains. And the Engineers Labor Employer Cooperative, ELEC, puts them to work. They create opportunities for the men, women, and union signatory contractors of Local 825. Repaving our roads, keeping our homes bright and warm, and even building our favorite team stadium. We understand infrastructure. That's why ELEC and Local 825 are ready to get to work.